Welcome back to KMOX, Overnight America. Brad Young here this evening. Thanks for sitting in with us. You've heard about Pamela Hupp. I know you have. And Pamela Hupp, she was featured extensively on NBC Dateline after she allegedly murdered Betsy Faria, and then she was convicted. It's called an Alford plea, but she was convicted of the murder of a mentally challenged young man, Louis Gumpenberger. Pamela Hupp is also suspected, get this, of murdering her own mother, Shirley Newman. So last week there was something in the news regarding this Pamela Hupp case, so I wanted to go to the attorney for the Gumpenberger family, Gary Burger. Gary, welcome to KMOX.
Hey, Brad. Good evening.
It's good to talk to you again, sir.
You too.
We've all got a thumbnail sketch here of the Pamela Hupp situation, but what happened in the news last week is the reason why I wanted to bring you on this evening. You obtained a $3 million verdict against Pamela Hupp. Tell us about that. What's the basis for the verdict?
The basis of the verdict was a wrongful death claim for the death of Louis Gumpenberger. I represented Margaret Birch, and when Pam Hupp murdered Louis, he left behind two children, one young son, that Margaret, the boy's grandmother, has raised. So all three of them, Louis, Margaret, and Trevelyan, lived together. And then after Louis was killed by Pamela Hupp, now just the two of them live together.
So Pamela Hupp, she's still incarcerated, right?
Yes, sir. We served her in jail.
Wow.
She's serving a life sentence for the murder of for Louis.
Yeah, Mr. Gumpenberger. So did she respond at all whenever you served her with the lawsuit there in prison? Did she respond to that?
Crickets. No response.
Nothing.
We served her. When you have these proceedings, you serve them. You put them on notice of the hearing. You serve them with this stuff, but no response.
So you didn't have a chance to take her deposition or anything, did you?
No, but Brad,
that would have been
fun.
The
law. Well, what about my collection action? What about my garnishment that I'm now filing?
And that's what I want to get to, because she didn't have any assets to speak of, does she?
No, there's the issue with that. If you recall, or your listeners recall, there was this issue of the life insurance proceeds from after the death of Betsy Faria that she was supposed to allegedly hold in trust for Betsy's kids, and then now when you obtain these kind of judgments, if you don't have insurance to go after, you seek to collect someone's personal assets, and so that's what a garnish proceeding, a separate proceeding under Missouri law, is for.
We're talking to Gary Burger, and Gary is the attorney for Louis Gumpenberger family, who obtained a $3 million verdict against convicted murderer Pamela Hupp just last week. So if there's a situation here, Gary, where she doesn't necessarily have any assets, what's the goal in pursuing the litigation?
Well, the goal, as Margaret told us, very moving testimony, Brad, in St. Charles County Court on Friday last. And what Margaret told the judge is she never wants Pamela Hupp to profit or benefit from her murder of Louis. And you read these, there's been a lot of attention on this grisly murder and the crazy tale that Hupp wove around it. And we don't want any book deal, movie deal, whatever there might be down the road to go to Pam Hupp. We want it to go to Louis's family first.
Yeah, I know that NBC has covered it extensively, and if I could do a good impression of Keith Morrison here, I would, but I can't. But they've covered it extensively, and it really, her whole story, it reads like a work of fiction, but you had to deal with the aftermath, the reality, and the real life aftermath of what this woman did.
That's exactly right. This circus that Pam Hupp created with these stories, and then Mr. Faria going to jail, and then suing and winning a settlement against Lincoln County for wrongly prosecuting him, and these twists and turns in the story, and victimizing Louis Gumpenberger, who had a mental age of a child due to a traumatic brain injury in a car wreck, and people. the sensationalized news of this crazy story, people sometimes forget the victims that are left behind, like this young child, being, not having a father. Margaret told this really moving. Margaret had never told her story, and typically, Brad, this as a trial lawyer, and in this type of a hearing, sometimes you put on evidence of damages, you don't get into the details of what happened, but the judge stopped the courtroom and he said, "I want to hear your story," because he said, "I know you've never gotten a chance to your story." So she stood up at a podium, shaken. The podium was shaken, and there wasn't a dry eye in that courtroom when she told the story about how Lewis was mentally challenged, but what he did for work is he went and helped other mentally challenged people in a job. He didn't make much money, but every time he got his paycheck, he went and picked up his then 11-year-old son, took him to Walmart, and bought a present for him. My grandfather did that for me when I was at Grandpa Pigeon's down on Manchester Road when I was a young
remember
boy.
that.
So I, everybody sat and watched that story, and so you're right. It's a great question. People forget about the victims, the shattered lives left behind.
Well, I've seen, and in fact, I've even participated in several of these cases against incarcerated defendants who don't appear. And it's really just a pro forma exercise in many instances just to go through the motions to get a judgment for whatever reason. But in this case, it just struck me, Gary, that yours, the case that you went through last week to get that judgment, it seemed to have a higher purpose in terms of how it impacted the Gumpenberger family.
It truly did. It truly did. Margaret, this mother and grandmother has been. You've seen all these videos, pictures of her coming out of the courthouse and all this. She's kept her mouth shut, but it was her chance to try to get some justice for her son, and so there is that higher purpose. I don't like. We wouldn't want someone like this. You hear these crazy murderers lately, later in life when the dust settles, trying to. Because what else are they going to do in jail, right?
Right.
They're stewing for years, and then they get these crazy ideas. And she certainly she is a fount of crazy ideas.
Well, and we've seen that on parade in this particular circus of a case. So you're exactly right. We're talking to Gary Burger, who's the attorney for the Lewis Gumpenberger family. He obtained a $3 million verdict against convicted murderer Pamela Hupp just last week, and I wanted to bring him on this evening to talk about it because this is different. In one sense, it's obviously sensational because of the media, but in another sense, it's a demonstration of an attorney helping a family, even though there may not be any money involved, but he's going the extra distance here just to help out a family who's been traumatized, and I wanted to hear it directly from Gary Burger. Now, here's what I want to kind of turn to for a few moments. Under the rules of civil procedure, Pamela Hupp could file a motion to overturn this judgment, couldn't she?
Yep.
And how does that work? Explain to us that particular procedure that allows someone who's, and for lack of a better phrase, convicted in absentia, but when they're convicted of this, how can they get that overturned?
Well, yeah. So many of the kind of cases that I try in front of a jury, and I get verdicts for clients, and I think you and I have had a case together in the past.
We have.
Yes, we have. So that's how it normally works. Where you have a zealous opponent like yourself on the other side. We go fight. We go do it. And I've tried a lot of cases and gotten some good results from my people. In this type of a case, you're right. It was me trying to help a family because Brad, on our law license on the wall in my office, it says that we have to do pro bono. It's some of the things that lawyers should do to try to help folks. So in this case, in absentia, if there's what's called a default judgment, there's a lower threshold to challenge that or collaterally attack that within a year. But after a year, if you don't come in and try to set it aside, then it's permanent. You can't collaterally attack it. That is like a judgment as if you and I were trying a case and a jury came back with a large verdict for my client.
So, and at least from my perspective, and certainly if you disagree, tell me, but from my perspective, since she doesn't have a lot of assets, she's not a likable figure that makes people want to come and help her for free. So the chances of her hiring an attorney and overturning this judgment, at least in my perspective, is rather low. Would you agree with that?
very low, and I don't think she's going to do it. And if she did, bring it on. I'll go try this case any day of the week, and I'll get a better result, or at least a good result, right?
Sure. Because if she gets it overturned, it's not
it's
as
like
if
this case is shooting fish in a barrel. I don't mean you know what I mean. But
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure. Well, no, I was going to point out that if it does get overturned, it's not as if it goes away. You would then have the opportunity to retry the case once again, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and you're right. You could even get a bigger number next time. So the point of it, obviously, part of it, and I think a major part of you going through and getting this judgment for the Gumpenberger family was just to let the Gumpenberger family tell their story and to experience the pain that they had to experience and move on from that experience. But also, this will hopefully prevent Pamela Hupp from going out and writing a book or selling a story or selling the movie rights or something in the future, won't it?
Yes, sir. And as you noted well in your intro, she did what's called an Alford plea, where she didn't admit guilt or didn't do anything other than kind of just get sentenced. So there's no one took any responsibility, and that's why we have trials, to get that closure. Trials are for when people don't take responsibility, and that's what we tried to do on Friday to get this judgment for the family. And you talked about setting it aside. The judge was very foggerous over in St. Charles. He went out of his way to make findings on the record about the statute of limitations and other issues to try to protect the record down the road should there be a attempt to attack this judgment, as you and I have been discussing.
Yeah, and I want to get into that in just a moment. We're talking to Gary Burger. He's the attorney for Louis Gumpenberger, and we're talking about his $3 million judgment against convicted murderer Pamela Hupp. And as I was looking into this over the last few days, Gary, and was looking at it with my lawyer hat on, I noticed that there were several legal obstacles, including a statute of limitations issue that you had to get around. What was that issue, and how did you get around that?
Well, sure. So, Margaret and this family wasn't looking to file a lawsuit. Most of my clients that come to me aren't saying, hey, all this stuff happened to me. Now I want to have to go hire a lawyer and go through all this stuff. But after she did the Alford plea, and after 3 years had passed, which is the time limit to file a lawsuit for wrongful death in Missouri, she had come to me and my firm and asked for our help. So in our pleading and how we filed it, we cited case law from the Missouri Supreme Court. It's the Beasley versus Perigo case, and there's other cases that talk about if there's this action of wrongful death, and or if a defendant takes actual affirmative action to hide their conduct and commit fraud, that there's this idea of equity in the law. It's not, the law isn't just a black and white deal. We consider equitable principles, and there's this idea that if someone does the kind of action that Pam Hupp did, she should be stopped. She should, under ideas of equity and fairness, she shouldn't be able to raise a 3-year statute of limitations. And there's specific law on this that is, it runs earlier than the specific case that I referenced, and I know you're familiar with this law, but that's what we did. And the judge went out of his way to analyze the case and make specific findings. We made allegations in the petition that went unrebutted to that end in terms of her hiding and lying about how she killed Louis, because she planted a false note on him that said it had to do with Faria and to make it look like Betsy's murder.
Hey Gary, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Gary, but we're coming up on a hard break here. I got to let you go. Gary Burger, thanks for standing up for the Gumpenberger family, going against Pamela Hupp and getting a judgment for that family. Appreciate you joining us this evening on KMOX.